Hi, it's Andy Bower at Object Arts with part 3 of my video on how to create a lights out game with the Model View Presenter framework of Dolphin Smalltalk. If you remember, in part 2 we created 2 new classes. We created a presenter class for our lights out cell and a view class to display its model. The model is a value holder holding a Boolean value, true or false, which represents whether the light is on or off. So now let's go ahead and create the additional classes which represent the game board and the game presenter. The game board will be a model class that contains a certain number of value holders which represent the states of the lights. So let's go and use the class browser to create this this board class. We're going to call it LightsOutBoard. So create a new class LightsOutBoard. Okay, and we're going to have a number of cells in this board. So we need an instance variable to hold them. Okay. On the class side, let's create a constructor method. Let's call it with size, giving an integer number of cells we want to create. We'll try and we'll pass the side of the square, the length of the side of the square that we want to create. So let's create our method with size and pass it an integer parameter, and we're going to use super new and call an instance method set size with that integer value. Okay, pile that. In order that we can create a default version of this with just using the new method, let's also add new to this, and we will make that call self with size and a default size. We can write a method to answer that value for us. Accept that, and let's create our default size method. And the default size in this case is going to be 10, so we want to create a 10 by 10 square of lights. So on the instance side, we need to define our set size method, and that's going to take an integer, and we want to create an array of cells up to an integer squared. So the way we can do that is we can use a range 1 to integer squared, and we collect that into a number of Boolean value holders holding true. Okay, let's add a couple of accessor methods for the one for the cells itself. Okay, and let's add another one for the size of the square, which in fact is going to be the same as the square root of the cell size. And truncated it to always return an integer, just in case we don't have a square. Okay, so that should be enough to represent our board. That's the model for our game. Now let's go and create the game presenter, which we can call LightsOutGame. We're going to want this to be a shell presenter because it appears in a shell window on the screen. So let's go and find the shell presenter class, and let's descend from this. So I'll create a new class called LightsOutGame. Okay, and once again, the first thing we do is to create a default model class, a default model method on the class side. And in this particular case, we want to answer a new LightsOutBoard. Okay. Now, if we move over onto the instance side, we need to think about what this presenter is going to contain. In previous examples, we've actually used we've overridden the create components method of presenter to specify the sub-presenters. However, in this particular case, because we don't know how many cells there are going to be until the model is assigned to us, we're going to have to dynamically create our sub-presenters. Now, we can't do this in the create components method because the model isn't set up at that point, so we need to do it some point after that, and a suitable point, I think, would be to do it inside onViewOpened. So let's override onViewOpened, and when you do this, you should always send supersend it, and what we're going to do is call a method called create cell presenters. Okay, let's compile that, and let's go and define that method. So we're going to create cell presenters, and the first thing we want to do is it's possible we might be reassigning a new model to this presenter, so we want to get rid of any ones we've created before. So we'll clear the existing cell presenters. I'm going to write this method in a minute. Okay, and what we'll do is we will go through all of the cells in the attached model, and for each one of those cells we will create a new lights out cell inside ourself. Okay, so the create on method, a create in on method, will create a new sub-presenter inside ourselves and given a particular model. Now that should do it for this create cell presenters method. If I reformat and accept that. Now we're being warned that we need to define this method, clear existing cell presenters. It occurs to me that in order to know which presenters have been included in this, have been dynamically created before, we're going to need an instance variable to hold this. So let's go and add an instance variable cell presenters. Okay, accept that, and we're going to need to initialize that with an initialize method. So let's define that here. Once again, initialize on the class side is always supercent, and now we're going to let's create an ordered collection to hold the cell presenters, and we can add, as we create them, we can add them into there so we know what we've created. So if we go back now to create cell presenters, as we create each one of these, we can add it into that new cell presenters ordered collection. So we can do cell presenters add CP. Okay. Now we can go and correct this method, clear existing cell presenters. and we need to loop through all of those, destroying each one. So we can do cell presenters, go through each one, and we can just destroy it, which will remove it at the same time. So we can accept that. And that's pretty much all we need to do to get us going. So what we need to do now is to create ourselves a view in the usual way by right clicking and saying new, default view, and the view composer comes up. Let's resize this, okay, into a sort of vague square. We can give it a caption. Yep, and maybe a background color. Okay, and the other thing we might want to do is to turn off the resizing. So we can go to is resizable, turn that off, stop people resizing it into something that's not square. And also we want to turn use preferred extent off, so that Windows doesn't get to choose the size, and it sticks with the size we've given it. Okay, now you might say, as we're adding these presenters into the view, we haven't actually specified where they go in the view, and that's because we can do something quite clever here. We can use one of the Dolphin layout managers to specify how the subviews in this are rearranged. So in order to do that, we can go and find the layout manager property here, double click on it, and we're going to use a thing called a grid layout. So we'll create that grid layout, and you'll see when it's been inserted that it basically specify a number of columns and a number of rows in the grid layout. We can do this dynamically as we're building the sub-presenters. So let's save this away, and if we now go back, and we just need to, when we're creating our cell presenters, we need to just go and make sure that we add enough rows in that layout manager. So we can basically ask our view for its layout manager, and we know that it's going to be a grid layout, so we know that we can use the rows method on it, and we can set the number of rows to the size of the model. If you remember, we created a method on our model size which returned the length of each side. So that should work. Okay, let's accept that. And that should be enough to give it a quick whirl. In the next video in this series, we'll launch our Lights Out game for the first time to try it out, and we'll do a bit of coding in the debugger to finish off the missing parts.